Trayvon Williams, at 37 years old, understood the elemental nature of heat. As a copper smelter plant operator for Asarco in Tucson, he spent his days managing the colossal furnaces that turned raw earth into rivers of liquid fire, a process that required patience, precision, and an unshakable respect for the forces at play. His salary was $69,000 a year, an honest wage earned through sweat and vigilance. He knew that some things, once they reach a certain temperature, cannot be cooled down. They can only be transformed. On the evening of their 10th wedding anniversary, at exactly 7:58 p.m., he sat across from his wife, Latifa, at Casa Vicente, a Spanish restaurant on North Oracle Road, known for its paella and live flamenco music. The air was thick with the scent of garlic, saffron, and Latifa's $280 Chanel No. 5 perfume. A single, perfect rose sat in a slender glass vase between them, a prop in a play he no longer wished to be a part of. For 18 months, Trayvon had been living a double life. To Latifa, he was the same steady, simple man she had married, a man who clocked in, clocked out, and paid the bills on their beautiful $450,000 home in the Sabino Canyon foothills. But in secret, he was a strategist, a collector of data, a man meticulously building a case for his own liberation. He had no idea the end would arrive tonight, but he was prepared for it. He was always prepared. Latifa looked radiant, her deep brown skin glowing in the restaurant's dim, romantic light. She was wearing a new dress, a silk floral number that she had mentioned cost a fortune, which he knew from the credit card statement meant it was a $1,450 piece from a boutique in Scottsdale. Her hair was styled in intricate cornrows, a work of art that had cost $350 and an entire Saturday afternoon. She raised her glass of $18 Albarino, her fingers adorned with a dazzling 2.5-carat diamond ring he was still paying for, wrapped delicately around the stem. "Happy anniversary, baby," she said, her voice a smooth melody that had once been the only music he wanted to hear. "Happy anniversary, Latifa," he replied, his voice even. He did not call her baby. He hadn't, in his own mind, for a very long time. He had paid for their life together, not just with his $69,000 salary, but with his silence, his dignity, his pride. He had paid for the $55,000 Acura RDX she drove, while he drove his 2012 Toyota Camry, with 187,000 miles on it. He had paid for the bi-weekly house cleaning service at $180 a visit, because she found the dust of the Sonoran Desert to be an intolerable nuisance. He paid the $2,800 monthly mortgage on the house that she filled with friends he didn't like, and conversations that made him feel like a ghost in his own home. He had paid, and he was done paying. Their life hadn't always been a ledger of his contributions and her withdrawals. When they first met, he was 30. She was 28. He was a junior operator at the smelter, proud of his work, of the tangible product of his labor. She worked as a receptionist at a law firm downtown, and she had a laugh that could fill a room and a dream of a life that was bigger and brighter than the one she had. He was captivated. He loved her ambition, the way she talked about the future as if it were a country she was destined to conquer. They dated for 2 years, and his simple world expanded. He traded his quiet nights with a book for gallery openings and wine tastings. He bought his first suit that cost more than $200. She taught him about things he'd never considered, like thread counts and appetizer forks. He taught her about the quiet beauty of a desert sunset and the deep satisfaction of a home-cooked meal. He thought they were building a bridge between their two worlds. He had no idea she was merely building a temporary outpost while scouting for better territory. They married at the Tucson Botanical Gardens, a simple, beautiful ceremony that cost just under $10,000, a sum that had made him sweat, but that she had assured him was an investment in their memories. A year later, his mother passed away, leaving him a modest inheritance of $85,000. It was the entirety of her life's savings, scraped together from 40 years of work as a school cafeteria manager. For Latifah, the timing was providential. "This is our chance, Trayvon," she had said, her eyes wide with excitement as they sat at the kitchen table of his small rental apartment. She spread glossy real estate brochures across the table, covering the water rings and worn spots on his old wooden surface. "We can finally get out of this place. We can get a real house, a house we can be proud of." He had hesitated. The money felt sacred, stained with the quiet grief of his loss. "I don't know, Latifah. It's Mama's money. I wanted to be smart with it." "What's smarter than real estate?" she argued, her voice full of irrefutable logic. "It's an investment. We'll be building equity, not just throwing money away on rent for this little box." She gestured around his $850 a month apartment, the place where he had felt perfectly comfortable until that exact moment. So he had agreed. He took the entire $85,000 and used it as a down payment on the 4-bedroom, 3-bath house in the foothills of the Catalina Mountains. It was a beautiful house, with vaulted ceilings, a swimming pool, and a view of the city lights at night. It was also a house with a mortgage that consumed nearly 40% of his take-home pay. But Latifah was ecstatic. She called it their forever home. The first few years in the house were a blur of activity. Latifah quit her receptionist job, declaring it was time for her to focus on bigger things. She enrolled in online courses for interior design, then for life coaching, then for starting a high-end concierge service. Each venture began with a flurry of expensive purchases, a new $2,500 MacBook Pro, a series of $500 online seminars, a custom-designed website for $3,000, and ended a few months later with a quiet fizzle. Trayvon never complained. He worked overtime shifts at the smelter, the intense, shimmering heat of the copper a familiar comfort. While Latifah was chasing dreams, he was making the ingots that paid for them. Their domestic life settled into a routine that he mistook for normalcy. He would wake at 5 a.m., the sky still a deep, bruised purple. He'd make coffee, pack his lunch in his worn metal lunchbox, a thermos of coffee, a sandwich, an apple, and head out to the plant. He'd return 12 hours later, covered in a fine layer of dust, the smell of sulfur clinging to his $150 Red Wing work boots. He'd find Latifah on the phone with one of her friends, reclining on their $4,000 sectional sofa, a glass of wine in her hand. The house would be immaculate, thanks to the cleaners. Dinner would be a takeout container from a place he couldn't afford on his own, the remnants of a $75 meal she'd ordered for herself. "Hey, baby," she'd say, barely looking up from her phone. "How was the fire pit?" "It was good," he'd say. "We poured 300 tons today." "That's nice," she'd reply, her attention already back on the glowing screen. She didn't know what pouring 300 tons meant, and he had long ago stopped trying to explain it. It was his world, and it was as foreign to her as the surface of the moon. Her world was one of influencers, brand collaborations, and a complex social hierarchy he could never hope to understand. He was just the foundation, the unseen, unglamorous bedrock on which her glittering world was built. He told himself it was fine. This was marriage. It was about partnership, about supporting each other's dreams. Even if you didn't fully understand them, he loved her, and he thought she loved him. He was a simple man, and he believed in simple things. You work hard, you keep your promises, you love your wife. He had no idea how wrong he was about that last part, The first time he heard the joke, it was a Saturday afternoon in May, 18 months before the anniversary dinner. The sun was a brutal, white-hot disk in the Tucson sky. They were hosting a barbecue for a few of Latifah's friends. Trayvon was at the grill, a cheap $300 charbroil he'd bought at Home Depot, flipping burgers and hot dogs. Sweat dripped down his temples, and the smoke stung his eyes, but he was content. He liked the simple, satisfying work of feeding people. Latifah was holding court by the pool, sitting on a new $800 patio lounger. She was with her best friend, a woman named Sharon, who always looked at Trayvon with a mixture of pity and contempt. They were drinking rosé from tall, elegant glasses. Trayvon could hear their laughter, sharp and bright, cutting through the lazy afternoon buzz. He was about to call out that the burgers were ready when he heard Sharon's voice carry across the yard. "Girl, I don't know how you do it," Sharon said. "All that talk about wanting a man with ambition, a real boss. And you end up with—" She trailed off, letting the unspoken criticism hang in the hot, dry air. Trayvon froze, spatula in hand. He wasn't meant to hear this. It was a private conversation, a crack in the facade of their perfect life. Then he heard Latifah's laugh, a sound he had once cherished, now turned into something sharp and cruel. "Oh, honey, please," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Trayvon is a wonderful man. He's my plan A. He's reliable. He's stable." She said the word stable as if it were a synonym for boring. There was a pause. Trayvon held his breath. "But a smart woman always has a plan B," Latifah continued, and both women erupted in a fresh wave of laughter. "Thank God for plan B. He's just easier." Trayvon felt the words like a physical blow. A cold wave washed over him, a chilling counterpoint to the searing heat of the grill. Plan B, easier. He didn't understand. Was there another man? Who was Plan B? The questions swirled in his head, a nauseating vortex of confusion and betrayal. He looked over at his wife, the beautiful black woman, whose skin was luminous in the afternoon light, laughing with her friend. In that moment, she was a stranger to him. He didn't confront her. What would he say? Who is Plan B? She would deny it, call him crazy, insecure. She would turn it around and make it his fault. He knew her. He knew how she operated. So he did nothing. He took a deep breath, turned the burgers, and pretended he hadn't heard a thing. But the words were there, branded into his mind. Thank God for Plan B. He's just easier. The party ended. The friends left. He and Latifah cleaned up in silence. He felt a chasm opening between them, a vast, empty space that hadn't been there that morning. That night, he lay in their king-sized bed on his side of their $3,000 memory foam mattress and stared into the darkness. Latifah was asleep, breathing softly beside him. He felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. The next day was Sunday. He told Latifah he was going to Home Depot to get some parts for a leaky faucet. Instead, he drove his Camry to a quiet park on the other side of town. He sat on a bench and watched children play on a swing set. He thought about his mother. He thought about the $85,000. He thought about the word stable. He had always considered it a compliment. Now he saw it for what it was in her eyes. An insult. He took out his phone and searched for divorce lawyers in Tucson. The screen filled with names and smiling faces. He scrolled past the big, flashy firms. Then he saw a small, unassuming ad on the side of the search results. David Chen, attorney at law, practical solutions for complex problems. There was no smiling photo, just a name and a number. It felt solid, stable. He called the number. Law offices of David Chen, a calm voice answered. "Hello?" Trayvon said, his own voice sounding distant and unfamiliar. "I'd like to schedule a consultation." The consultation cost him $400, an amount he had to pull from his personal savings account, the small emergency fund he kept separate from their joint accounts. David Chen's office was in a modest building downtown, not far from the courthouse. The man himself was in his late 40s, with kind eyes and a demeanor that was both professional and empathetic. He wore a simple, well-tailored suit that probably cost more than Trayvon's entire wardrobe, but he didn't radiate wealth. He radiated competence. Trayvon sat in a comfortable but not ostentatious leather chair and told David everything. He told him about the barbecue, the joke, the laughter. He told him about the house, the mortgage, his mother's inheritance. He told him about the slow, creeping feeling that he was being used, that his life was a resource being mined to fund someone else's dream. He felt foolish saying it all out loud. David listened patiently, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. He didn't interrupt. When Trayvon was finished, the lawyer looked at him over the top of his glasses. "Mr. Williams," he began, his voice calm and steady. "Trayvon, what you're describing is a classic case of financial and emotional dissipation. The joke about Plan B is cruel, but in a legal sense, it's the pattern of behavior that matters. The disdain it represents is a symptom of a larger problem." "So what do I do?" Trayvon asked, feeling helpless. "You have two choices," David said. "You can confront her, have a massive fight, and end up in a messy, contentious divorce where everything is thrown into chaos. Or you can be patient, you can be strategic, you can play the long game." "The long game?" "Yes," David said, leaning forward. "For the next year, maybe longer, you do nothing. You continue to be the steady, reliable man she thinks you are. You go to work, you pay the bills, you smile at her friends. But in the meantime, you and I will be working. We will be documenting every expensive purchase she makes that is not for the marital benefit, every trip she takes without you, and most importantly, every single time she makes that joke." He handed Trayvon a small black notebook. "Keep this with you. Date, time, location, who was present. Write down exactly what was said, verbatim. This notebook will become our most powerful tool. In a divorce, he who has the best records often wins. Her casual cruelty will become our evidence. Her mockery will be her undoing." A cold resolve settled over Trayvon, displacing the hot anger and shame. It felt like the moment a furnace reaches its optimal temperature, when chaos gives way to controlled, powerful energy. "Okay," he said, taking the notebook. The cover was smooth and cool beneath his fingers. "Okay, we play the long game." The 18 months that followed were a masterclass in deception. On the outside, Trayvon was the picture of normalcy. He went to work, he fixed the leaky faucet, he mowed the lawn. He sat through dinners with Latifah's friends, his face a calm, pleasant mask. Inside, he was a different man. He was a detective, an archivist, a man on a mission. The little black notebook became his constant companion. Incident number 2, October 12th. Brunch at Prep and Pastry, 11:30 a.m. Latifah was with Sharon and another friend, a woman named Chloe. They were seated on the patio, surrounded by the clatter of silverware and the cheerful chatter of other diners. Latifah was wearing a new pair of $650 Chloe sunglasses. Trayvon had paid the credit card bill that morning. He was drinking a simple $4 black coffee. Latifah and her friends were on their third round of $14 mimosas. "You're so lucky, Latifah," Chloe said, admiring the diamond bracelet on Latifah's wrist, a $2,000 anniversary gift from the previous year. "Trayvon is just so sweet. He takes such good care of you." Latifah smiled, a slow, cat-like smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He is sweet," she agreed. "He's my rock, my solid, dependable Plan A." She paused for effect, then winked at Sharon. "But you know, a girl's got to have options. Thank God for Plan B. He's got his own business, you know. Much more exciting. Sharon and Chloe tittered with laughter. Trayvon felt a familiar coldness spread through his chest. He took a sip of his coffee. Later that night, he opened the black notebook. October 12th, 11:32 a.m. prep and pastry. Witnesses, Sharon, Chloe. Quote, "Thank God for Plan B. He's got his own business, you know." Much more exciting. He noted the cost of the brunch, which came to $187, paid for from their joint account. Every 2 weeks, Trayvon would meet with David Chen. He would hand over photocopies of the notebook pages and the latest credit card statements, which he had started having sent to a new post office box he'd rented for $20 a month. David would scan the documents, his expression unreadable. "This is good, Trayvon," David said during one of their meetings in his quiet, orderly office. "The pattern is becoming undeniable. The bracelet, the sunglasses, the brunches. This isn't marital spending. This is a lifestyle she's funding with your labor. And the jokes establish motive. They show a clear and consistent disregard for you and the marriage. A judge will see this not as a partnership, but as an exploitation." David pointed to a line on a bank statement. "This $3,500 charge to a Scottsdale spa resort. Were you there?" "No," Trayvon said. "She went with Sharon for a wellness weekend." "And this $1,200 purse from Louis Vuitton?" "She said it was an investment piece." David just nodded, making a note. "Keep going, Trayvon. You're doing great. Your patience will pay for itself, literally." Incident number 5, February 2nd, a Super Bowl party at a friend's house, 6:15 p.m. The party was loud, chaotic, and full of people Latifah considered her network. Trayvon was in the corner, watching the game on a massive 85-inch television. He was comfortable here, surrounded by the simple drama of sport. Latifah was circulating, a glass of champagne in her hand, dressed in a tight black $800 Hervé Léger dress that seemed impractical for a Super Bowl party. He overheard her talking to a man he didn't know, a slick-looking guy in a designer suit. The man was clearly impressed by her. "So, what does your husband do?" the man asked. Trayvon watched as Latifah's eyes flickered over to him in the corner. A brief, dismissive glance. "Oh, him?" she said with a little laugh. "He's in manufacturing. Very hands-on." The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "He's my sweet, reliable Plan A. Keeps the lights on?" She leaned in conspiratorially. "But my Plan B? He's in finance. Now that's where the real money is." The man laughed, appreciating the joke. Trayvon felt his jaw tighten. He turned his attention back to the game, but he could no longer follow the plays. The roar of the crowd on the television was drowned out by the roar in his own ears. That night, the entry in the notebook was precise and clinical. February 2nd, 6:17 p.m. Super Bowl party at the Miller residence. Witness, unidentified male in a gray suit. Quote, "He's my sweet, reliable Plan A. But my Plan B? He's in finance." Life at home became a tightrope walk. Trayvon was a method actor in the role of a devoted husband. He asked about her day. He complimented her outfits, the same outfits he was documenting as evidence of her financial irresponsibility. He played his part so well that Latifah seemed to become even more brazen, more confident in his obliviousness. One evening, he came home from a grueling 14-hour shift. He was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your soul. He found Latifah in their home office, on the phone. The door was ajar, and he could hear her animated voice. "I'm telling you, Sharon, it's hilarious," she was saying. "He just believes everything. I told him I needed $500 for a business development course, and he just transferred it. No questions asked." She let out a peal of laughter. "He's like my own personal ATM, my sweet, simple Plan A." As long as he keeps funding the dream, I can keep my real options open. Plan B is getting impatient, you know. Trayvon stood frozen in the hallway, the smell of burnt sugar and sulfur from the plant still clinging to his clothes. The words hit him harder than any furnace blast. My own personal ATM suite. Simple Plan A. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It was her worldview. He was not her partner, he was her resource. He was a mine to be exploited until it ran dry, at which point she would move on to the next claim. He backed away from the door silently, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. He went into the garage, his only real sanctuary in the house. He sat on a stool next to his workbench, surrounded by his tools, hammers, wrenches, saws, things that built, things that fixed. He looked at his hands, calloused and stained from a lifetime of honest work, and he realized that nothing in that house was broken. It was all working exactly as it was designed to. He was the one who needed fixing. The next day he met with David Chen. "It's time," Trayvon said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I want a file." David looked at the file they had built, now several inches thick. It contained 18 months of bank statements, credit card bills, and the meticulously detailed notes from Trayvon's black notebook. 9 separate incidents of the Plan B joke, each one a nail in the coffin of their marriage. "The documentation is ironclad, Trayvon," David said. "Her pattern of dissipation of marital assets is clear. The emotional cruelty is well established. And most importantly, we have a clear paper trail showing that the down payment for the house came from your separate inherited funds. That is your money, and we will get it back for you." They decided on a date, their 10th wedding anniversary. It was Latifah's idea to celebrate at Casa Vicente. "It's so romantic," she'd said. "We have to do it right for the big 1-0. "We will file the petition on the Thursday before your anniversary dinner," David explained, laying out the final steps of the strategy. "That way, it's officially in the court system. I will have a process server on standby that evening. You will have a single task. At the appropriate moment, you will signal me with a simple text message. The word 'now.' The server will be inside the restaurant within 2 minutes." "What's the signal?" Trayvon asked. "That's up to you," David said. "But after everything she's put you through, I think it should be something definitive." Trayvon nodded. He knew exactly what it would be. And so he found himself at Casa Vicente on Friday, October the 25th at 8 p.m., watching his wife prepare to deliver the final, fatal blow to their marriage. The restaurant was crowded, the atmosphere festive. A guitarist in the corner was playing a soulful, intricate flamenco melody. The sound was beautiful, but to Trayvon, it sounded like a dirge. Latifah was in her element. She had already taken a half-dozen selfies, carefully curating the image of a blissfully happy wife celebrating a decade of love. She had flagged down their waiter to complain that her Albarino was not chilled to her precise liking. She was performing the role of a woman of discerning taste, a role he had been funding for years. "Isn't this perfect?" she sighed, looking around the room. "I'm so glad we did this. 10 years. Can you believe it?" "No," Trayvon said, the single word holding a universe of meaning that was lost on her. "I saw Sharon over there," Latifah said, gesturing with her head toward a large, noisy table near the stage. "She's here for her boss's birthday. Small world?" Trayvon's eyes followed her gesture. He saw Sharon, her face flushed from wine, laughing loudly. A key witness. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The waiter brought their appetizers, a plate of gambas al ajillo, shrimp sizzling in garlic and oil for $16, and a plate of patatas bravas for $12. Latifah picked at the shrimp with a fork, her expression one of bored indulgence. Trayvon ate a potato. It tasted like ash. "So," Latifah said, putting down her fork and fixing him with a bright, artificial smile. A toast. To us. To 10 years. She raised her glass. He dutifully raised his water glass. But she wasn't looking at him. She was looking over his shoulder, toward Sharon's table. She raised her voice, making sure it would carry. A toast, she called out, a theatrical gesture for her audience of one. To 10 years of a successful partnership, to my wonderful, supportive husband. A few people at the surrounding tables looked over, smiling. They saw a beautiful woman toasting her husband on their anniversary. They saw a happy story. Then, Latifah leaned forward slightly, a conspiratorial glint in her eye, and delivered the line she had been honing for 18 months, the line that had become her favorite party trick. And a special toast, she said, her voice dropping to a loud whisper that was perfectly audible to Sharon's table and, of course, to him. To always having a plan B just in case, she winked. Not at him, but at Sharon. Sharon across the room threw her head back and laughed, raising her own glass in solidarity. And there it was, the 10th documented instance, the final piece of data. The world went silent for Trayvon. The flamenco guitar, the clatter of plates, the buzz of conversation, it all faded away into a dull, distant hum. He looked at his wife's smiling face, her lips still curved from the punchline. He saw not the woman he had once loved, but a stranger who had taken his life and turned it into a joke. He felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even betrayal anymore. All he felt was the quiet, cold certainty of a furnace that has reached its final, immutable temperature. He didn't say a word. He simply, slowly, began to take off his wedding ring. It was a plain 8mm band of tungsten carbide, a metal known for its extreme hardness and resistance to scratching. It had cost him $250 online. He had chosen it because it was practical, durable, and unpretentious. He had chosen it because it felt like him. Latifah was still basking in the glow of her joke, waiting for his reaction, probably a confused or hurt look that she could dismiss later. She watched, her smile faltering slightly, as he worked the ring over his knuckle. He placed the ring on the white linen tablecloth, next to his untouched plate of paella, which had cost $38. The small metallic clink was barely audible, but in the silence that had fallen between them, it sounded like a gunshot. Her eyes darted from the ring to his face. The smile was gone now, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Trayvon, what are you doing? He looked at her, his gaze steady and clear. For the first time in 18 months, the mask was gone. She was seeing the real him, the man who had been watching, listening, and planning. Latifah, he said, his voice calm and devastatingly quiet. I filed on Thursday. Her face went blank. The words didn't seem to register. What? Filed what? What are you talking about? The pitch of her voice was rising, a note of panic creeping in. Is this some kind of joke? Because it's not funny. It was never a joke to me, he said. He reached into his pocket, his hand closing around the smooth, cool case of his phone. He unlocked it, pulled up his text thread with David Chen, and typed the single word they had agreed upon. Now. He pressed send at exactly 8:04 p.m. He put the phone back in his pocket and looked at his wife. The color was draining from her face, leaving her beautiful skin looking ashen under the restaurant lights. She was starting to understand. Not everything, but enough. You filed? She whispered, the word catching in her throat. You filed for divorce? Without talking to me? I've been trying to talk to you for years, he said, his voice still level. You just weren't listening. Just then, a figure appeared at their table. A tall, professional-looking black woman in a simple black pantsuit. She held a large, sealed manila envelope. "Excuse me," she said, her voice polite but firm. "Are you Latifah Jones?" Latifah stared at the woman, dumbfounded. "Yes? Who are you?" "My name is Maria. I'm a process server," the woman said, her eyes not unkind but utterly professional. She placed the thick envelope on the table, right next to the tungsten wedding ring. "You've been served." Latifah stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Her name was written on the front in bold, black letters. She looked from the envelope to the process server, then back to Trayvon. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The public nature of it, the sheer, calculated precision of the humiliation, was finally dawning on her. The process server gave a slight nod to Trayvon. "My work is done. Have a good evening." And then she was gone, melting back into the crowd. The spell was broken. The noise of the restaurant came rushing back in, but it felt different now, mocking. The happy chatter, the romantic music, it was all a backdrop to the complete and utter implosion of Latifah's world. "Here?" she finally hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "You did this to me here? At our anniversary dinner?" Trayvon didn't answer. He had already said everything that needed to be said. He stood up, pulling his worn leather wallet from his back pocket. It was a $40 wallet he'd had for a decade. He took out 2 crisp $100 bills and placed them on the table. Enough to cover their $157 bill and a generous tip for the waiter, who was now staring at them with wide, horrified eyes. "You can't do this," Latifah said, her voice cracking, a frantic edge of desperation taking over. "Trayvon, you can't just walk away." He looked down at her one last time. He saw the expensive dress, the perfect hair, the diamond ring he was still paying for. He saw a beautiful, hollow facade. And he felt a profound sense of peace. "I'm not walking away," he said. "I'm walking toward myself." And then he turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving his wife, his ring, and the ruins of their 10-year marriage behind him. He didn't look back. The first voicemail came at 8:17 p.m. while he was driving down Oracle Road, the windows of his Camry down, the cool night air washing over him. He didn't answer. He let it go to the recording he had set up with David's help. A simple, professional message stating his name and that he would return calls at his discretion. Voicemail number 1, anger/disbelief. "Trayvon, what the hell was that? You think you can humiliate me like that and just walk away? In front of everyone? In front of Sharon? You have lost your damn mind. You call me back right now. You hear me? Right now." He kept driving. He drove past their house in Sabino Canyon, the one with the pool and the view. He didn't slow down. He drove to a modest, clean hotel near the airport, a place he had pre-booked, paying $129 a night in cash. Voicemail number 2, threats. 8:45 p.m. "You are going to regret this for the rest of your life, Trayvon Williams. You think you can pull a stunt like that and there won't be consequences? I will take you for everything you have. That house is half mine. Everything is half mine. You will be living in that broken-down car of yours when I'm done with you." In his hotel room, Trayvon took a shower. He washed the scent of the restaurant and the last 10 years of his life off his skin. He put on a clean t-shirt and a pair of gym shorts. He felt lighter than he had in years. The next morning, he met David Chen for breakfast at a small diner. He handed over his phone, and they listened to the voicemails together. David simply nodded. "This is textbook. Stage 1, anger and threats. Stage 2 will be justification and bargaining." He was right. Voicemail number 3, justification, 10:30 a.m. "Okay, look, I've had some time to think, and I know you're upset. But it was a joke, Trayvon. A stupid joke. That's all it ever was. It's what me and the girls do. You're being so sensitive. You can't throw away 10 years of marriage over a stupid joke. The consequences began to cascade. Not for him, but for her. Latifah hired one of the most expensive and aggressive divorce attorneys in Tucson, a woman who charged $800 an hour. They came into the first mediation meeting with guns blazing, demanding half of everything, including a majority stake in the house and lifetime alimony. David Chen sat calmly on the other side of the polished mahogany table in the conference room. He let the other lawyer finish her tirade. Then he simply opened his briefcase and took out a thick, bound document. The dossier, as he had come to call it. "My client will not be paying alimony," David said, his voice even. "In fact, we will be arguing that for the past several years, Miss Jones has been living a lifestyle far beyond the means of the marital partnership, funded exclusively by my client's labor and inheritance. We have documented 18 months of spending totaling approximately $72,000 on non-marital items such as luxury goods, solo vacations, and personal services." He slid a copy of the dossier across the table. Latifah's lawyer opened it. Her confident expression slowly began to fade as she flipped through the pages. She saw the credit card statements with the designer dresses and spa weekends highlighted. She saw the bank transfers for online courses that led nowhere. Then she got to the notebook entries. David read one aloud for effect. February 2nd, Super Bowl party. Quote, "He's my sweet, reliable plan A. But my plan B? He's in finance." The state of Arizona is a no-fault divorce state, it's true, but judges are still human, and a documented long-term pattern of emotional cruelty and public mockery does not play well when you are asking that same court for a favorable judgment. Latifah, who had been sitting silently, finally spoke. "That's not fair. You were spying on me," she accused Trayvon. "I wasn't spying, Latifah," Trayvon said, speaking for the first time. "I was just listening. For the first time, I was really listening to what you were saying." He repeated her own words back to her. "You said I was your personal ATM, your sweet, simple plan A. You said plan B was just easier." The color drained from her face. She remembered the phone call with Sharon. She had thought she was so clever, so untouchable. The final blow was the house. Her lawyer argued that the $450,000 home was a marital asset and should be sold, with the proceeds split. "Not quite," David said, producing another document. "This is a bank statement from Mr. Williams' late mother's estate and a cashier's check showing the transfer of $85,000, which was used for the entire down payment on the house. These were inherited funds, kept separate, and used for a specific purpose. That equity is his alone. Given the current market and the outstanding mortgage, after my client is made whole on his initial investment, there is very little marital equity left to split." Latifah's world collapsed in that sterile conference room. The judge, citing the overwhelming and meticulously documented evidence of financial dissipation and bad faith, sided with Trayvon on almost every point. The consequences were swift and brutal. Consequence number 1, the house. She lost all claim to the Sabino Canyon home. She was given 30 days to vacate the premises. She had to move back into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a less fashionable part of town, paying $1,800 a month in rent. Consequence number 2, the debt. The court ruled that the nearly $38,000 in credit card debt was hers alone, as it was proven to be for her personal, non-marital spending. The $1,200 Louis Vuitton purse and the $1,450 dress were now anchors, dragging her down. Consequence number 3, the legal fees. Her own high-priced lawyer's bill came to over $45,000. She had no way to pay it. She had to sell the jewelry Trayvon had given her over the years, including the $2,000 diamond bracelet, just to make a down payment on her legal debt. Voicemail number 7, pleading. 3 weeks after the mediation. Trayvon, it's me. I'm at the apartment. It's small. I'm packing up my things at the house. This is all a mistake. We can fix this. I can change. I'll get a job, a real one. I love you. Please, just talk to me. Consequence number 4, the social fallout. The story of the anniversary dinner and the process server became legend in their social circle. But it wasn't the heroic story Latifah had imagined for herself. She wasn't the clever woman with a backup plan. She was the cruel wife who got what she deserved. Sharon stopped returning her calls. The invitations to parties and brunches dried up. Her network had dissolved. There was no plan B. There had never been a plan B. It was all a fantasy, a story she told herself to feel powerful. And now the story was over. Trayvon's legal fees came to $28,000, which he paid from his savings. It was, he thought, the best money he had ever spent. It was the price of his freedom. 2 years later. The desert sun, a benevolent gold in the early morning, streamed through the large picture window of the house in the Sabino Canyon foothills. The expensive, uncomfortable furniture Latifah had picked out was long gone, sold, or given away. It had been replaced with a sturdy, comfortable leather sofa that cost $1,500 and a solid wood coffee table he'd bought at a local furniture maker's shop. On the wall where a giant, abstract painting she'd bought for $5,000 once hung, there was now a large framed photograph of the Catalina Mountains at sunset, a picture he had taken himself. Trayvon, now 39, sat on his sofa, sipping coffee from a simple ceramic mug. The house was quiet, filled with a peace it had never known when Latifah lived there. The air no longer vibrated with tension and unspoken resentments. It was just a house now, his home. In the backyard, a small but thriving garden he had planted himself was growing tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. The scent of creosote from the desert floor after a rare rain was the only perfume he cared about. He was still at the Asarco smelter, now a senior plant operator, his salary a respectable $78,000 a year. But his real passion had become the apprenticeship program he had started. He found he had a knack for teaching, for taking young, raw kids from the south side of Tucson and showing them the value of hard, honest work. He taught them how to read the furnaces, how to respect the heat, how to build a life with their own 2 hands. He saw the same spark of pride in their eyes that he had once felt, and it was more rewarding than any paycheck. His Sundays were for the mountains. He would wake before dawn, fill his old thermos with coffee, and drive his Camry, now with over 220,000 miles on it, to a trailhead in the Catalinas. He would hike for hours, his $150 Red Wing boots, now beautifully worn, carrying him up the rocky paths. He loved the silence of the canyons, the vastness of the sky, the feeling of being a small but significant part of something ancient and enduring. He had heard through the grapevine that Latifah was working as a sales associate at a department store in the mall. He felt a brief, fleeting pang of something. Not pity, not satisfaction, just a distant sadness for the person she might have been. But the feeling passed quickly. Her story was no longer his concern. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. Holding on to anger was like holding on to a hot coal. He knew better than anyone that the only person you burn is yourself. He had let it go, let it cool, let it become just another part of the earth. He thought about true wealth. He used to think it was about the numbers in a bank account, the size of your house, the price tag on your car. He had learned that was a fool's ledger. True wealth was the peace in his own home. It was the respect of the young men he mentored. It was the silence of a desert canyon at dawn. It was the profound, unshakable knowledge of his own worth, a worth that couldn't be bought, sold, or diminished by anyone else's opinion. He finished his coffee and stood up. The sun was climbing higher in the sky, and there were mountains to climb. He was a simple man who believed in simple things. You work hard, you keep your promises, and you build a life that is as solid, as honest, and as enduring as the copper that runs like a river of fire through the heart of the earth. And that was a life to be proud of,